Breaking tonight. Hollywood is in absolute shock as Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce announce their engagement, while Blake Lively faces the most embarrassing revelations of her career from inside a deposition that exposes cracks in her story secrets, unraveling friendships destroyed and reputations on the line. This is bigger than anyone imagined. The story begins with a moment that feels almost too perfectly timed to be coincidence because just as the entertainment world was celebrating Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce stepping into their happily ever after with a surprise engagement announcement, the shadow of Blake Lively's courtroom struggles seemed to grow darker, louder, and more humiliating. And what makes this moment so dramatic is that Taylor, who has spent the better part of 2 years battling scandals, betrayals, and relentless public scrutiny, managed to flip the narrative in her favor by showcasing love stability and a future while Blake sat across from attorneys during a sworn deposition, fumbling for answers and unable to produce even a shred of evidence to back her multi-million-dollar accusations against a man she claimed orchestrated a smear campaign. And while the headlines ran wild with glowing details about Taylor's antique diamond ring, her carefully curated Ralph Lauren dress, and the poetry-inspired caption she shared on Instagram, the legal documents spilling out of Blake Lively's world painted a completely different picture, one of chaos, confusion, and deep reputational risk for an actress who once positioned herself as the golden girl of Hollywood, yet now seemed unable to defend her own claims without leaning on hearsay or the vague suggestion of clandestine operations swirling in the powers. Shadows, and this duality is what makes the moment so cinematic. On one side of the stage, you have Taylor Swift, the woman who was written off more than once, standing radiant in a field of flowers, locking hands with a man who cut his hair and stepped into his role as devoted fiancé, ready to face the world with her. And on the other side, you have Blake Lively stumbling through testimony, unable to name a single defamatory article or written statement directed at her by Jed Wallace, leaning instead on objections from her attorneys and descriptions that sound more like fiction than fact, using words like clandestine without being able to cite who exactly said them or where they came from. And in that deposition, a clear crack emerged, a realization that the foundation of her case was built on sand, because when asked directly to provide the receipts, Blake faltered. She admitted she does not go on social media to read about herself. She admitted she had no knowledge of any articles, and she admitted she could not point to a single piece of written evidence, yet still insisted there was a vast coordinated campaign against her. And at that very same time, Taylor Swift was proving that revenge does not always come in the form of a clapback or a diss track. Sometimes revenge is simply living well. Sometimes revenge is announcing to the world that you have built a love so strong, it outshines every scandal, every rumor, and every attempt to drag you into chaos. And so when the news dropped that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce were engaged with a ring designed in an old mine brilliant cut, and a caption that read like poetry, fans around the world erupted in celebration, while Blake was left grappling with the reality that her testimony might have just detonated her entire legal strategy, because without evidence, there is no defamation case. Without proof, there is only speculation. And when speculation meets the harsh light of court proceedings, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. And the juxtaposition of these two women, who were once photographed together as friends, could not be more striking. Taylor shining in her triumph, and Blake caught in the quicksand of her own contradictions. And while Taylor leaned into her domestic bliss, talking on her fiancé's podcast about baking sourdough bread and embracing the quiet joy of nesting, Blake found herself describing film locations with uncertainty, mixing up terms like B-roll with wide shots and inserts, struggling to appear credible about a film she insisted she shaped and edited, yet could not even identify basic production details. This unraveling testimony only deepened the sense that something was very wrong in her camp, because if an actress of Blake's stature could not even keep her story straight in sworn testimony, then what hope did her lawsuit have of surviving under the scrutiny of seasoned attorneys like Charles Babcock, who pressed her with precision questions designed to expose the absence of hard facts? And while her legal team tried desperately to object to every inquiry, the record still showed the reality. She had no evidence, she had no articles, she had no proof, and that reality stood in stark contrast to Taylor Swift holding her antique diamond ring up to the camera and letting the world know that despite betrayal, heartbreak, extortion threats, and being booed at the Super Bowl, she had won her narrative, she had found her partner, she had cemented her happy ending. And if Blake thought she could overshadow that with birthday posts and Instagram stories, the truth is that Taylor timing her announcement just one day after Blake's birthday felt like the ultimate mic drop. a poetic reversal of fortune that only intensified the sting of Blake Lively's crumbling credibility. The story only grows bigger as Hollywood reacts to the shocking developments with Taylor Swift, rumored to be engaged, and Blake Lively, once again dragged into the center of the storm after Andy Signore delivered his brutal commentary that seemed to not just call out Lively's behavior, but also peel back the curtain on how the industry has handled this entire fiasco. What we are witnessing now is not just a celebrity rumor mill spinning out of control, but a major cultural moment where fans, media outlets, and insiders are colliding in a frenzy of speculation, analysis, and backlash. The engagement talk surrounding Taylor Swift has electrified her fanbase and ignited heated debate across social media, some claiming it is the culmination of a love story years in the making, while others believe it is a carefully timed distraction meant to shift headlines away from the messy court battles and scandals swirling around her inner circle. And as for Blake Lively, she finds herself in the unenviable position of once again being the target of relentless criticism. People are replaying clips, dissecting old interviews, and poring over her recent public behavior looking for signs of guilt or defensiveness. Andy Signore's commentary landed like a bomb across Hollywood because he did not merely state an opinion, he brought receipts, timelines, and a clear breakdown of how Lively has allegedly manipulated narratives in the past. He connected the dots between her friendship with Taylor Swift, her marriage to Ryan Reynolds, and the larger legal circus involving Justin Baldoni and Brian Friedman. Signore pointed out how Lively often positions herself as the innocent party, yet time and again ends up at the center of storms. She claims to have no role in, and for many viewers, that hypocrisy struck a nerve. The power of this latest twist is how it intertwines public fascination with celebrity romance, and the darker undercurrents of Hollywood power plays on one hand. You have the dreamlike possibility that Taylor Swift, a global icon of songwriting and storytelling, may finally be settling down with the love of her life, a storyline her fans have been craving for years. On the other hand, you have a messy entanglement of lawsuits, leaked texts, and accusations of betrayal, dragging some of the biggest names in entertainment into the mud. The juxtaposition is almost cinematic. The question fans are asking now is whether Swift herself will speak directly on the rumors. Because silence only fuels speculation. Every vague social media post, every song lyric, every public appearance is being analyzed frame by frame looking for clues. Meanwhile, Blake Lively's camp appears to be scrambling. The more Andy Signore's analysis spreads, the more questions resurface about her credibility and her motives. Hollywood publicists know that once a narrative takes hold, it is nearly impossible to shake. And in this case, the narrative forming is that Lively may not be the loyal friend or innocent bystander. She wants the world to believe she is insiders. Whisper that Reynolds himself is increasingly frustrated that his wife's name keeps popping up in scandals that threaten to overshadow their carefully crafted image as the picture-perfect Hollywood couple. Now add to that the fact that their supposed best friend Taylor Swift is rumored to be celebrating the happiest moment of her life, while Lively is painted as the bitter hanger-on, and you have a recipe for total PR disaster. One of the reasons this story has blown up beyond the usual celebrity gossip cycle is because it touches on themes that resonate with ordinary people: trust, betrayal, friendship, and authenticity. Many fans feel protective of Swift because her career has always been intertwined with her personal struggles and victories. So if they sense that someone close to her has been disloyal or manipulative, it feels personal to them. The online backlash against Lively is not just about the current trial or the latest rumor. It is about years of perceived slights and inconsistencies that fans are now piecing together into a larger narrative. In the court of public opinion, perception is reality, and right now the perception is turning darker by the day. It is also impossible to ignore the timing of this explosion of headlines. Taylor Swift is at the height of her cultural influence, commanding sold-out stadium tours, topping charts with every release, and controlling media narratives like few artists ever have. So the idea that her engagement could be overshadowed by the scandals of her inner circle is unthinkable to her fan base, who want nothing but joy for her and everything but sympathy for those who may have dragged her into unnecessary drama. In that context, Andy Signore's viral takedown of Lively felt almost cathartic to many fans. It was as though someone finally said out loud what so many had been whispering for years, that Blake Lively plays a game of public perception that is more calculated than it seems, and that she may not be the supportive friend she presents herself to be. The backlash was immediate. Memes exploded across Twitter and Instagram. Hashtags began trending, and even mainstream media outlets picked up on the story, covering both the engagement rumors and the renewed scrutiny of Lively's behavior, when the Daily Mail, New York Times, and Entertainment Tonight all start covering the same twist within hours. You know, the story has reached critical mass as the fallout continues. We have to ask what comes next for all involved for Swift. The engagement rumors may turn out to be the perfect shield if confirmed. They will dominate headlines and drown out the negativity, at least temporarily, for Lively. However, the path forward looks far more treacherous. She faces the daunting task of repairing her image while still entangled in legal battles that threaten to expose more damaging details. And for Justin Baldoni and Brian Friedman, who stand on the other side of those battles, the spectacle only strengthens their hand, because every misstep by Lively weakens her credibility and bolsters theirs in the eyes of both the court and the public. The intersection of love, scandal, and law has created a moment that will define Hollywood gossip cycles for weeks, if not months, to come. And no matter how the details shake out, one thing is clear. The engagement rumor that should have been nothing but joy has instead become a lightning rod, pulling in every unresolved tension, every hidden betrayal, and every whispered accusation surrounding Taylor Swift and her closest circle. We are watching in real time as reputations rise and fall under the weight of public scrutiny. And it is a reminder that in Hollywood, nothing is ever simple. Not even love stories, especially not when friendship, betrayal, and billion-dollar reputations are at stake. The courtroom atmosphere had shifted dramatically by this stage, with every legal expert weighing in and every entertainment analyst dissecting each move made by the attorneys representing both sides, and the audience both inside the courtroom. And watching from afar through news updates and leaks could sense that this was no longer just about technicalities or minor disputes. It had escalated into a broader cultural moment, and people were drawing comparisons between this trial and other legendary Hollywood scandals that had once captured the public imagination. But what made the situation stand apart was how intertwined personal friendships, public images, and corporate stakes had become. Because when you take a figure like Blake Lively, who had cultivated a reputation for being America's sweetheart, the mom, the style icon, the perfect Hollywood wife, and suddenly place her in a position where private texts involving one of the most famous musicians on earth, Taylor Swift, might be read into evidence, you are forcing a collision between two powerful brands, and the possible fallout was being treated like an earthquake in real time. Reporters outside the courthouse kept repeating that they had never seen so much interest. In preliminary hearings, normally these phases are dull procedural stages that the public barely cares about. But in this case, the arguments over text message admissibility felt more like headline events, because those texts promised to either confirm or unravel entire narratives about loyalty, betrayal, and credibility. People online were speculating about what might be inside, with hashtags like Swifties versus Lively trending on social platforms, and memes were flying as fans on both sides defended their idols with near religious fervor. And of course, this was inflamed further when Andy Signore dropped his blunt commentary mocking Blake for what he saw as desperation to control the narrative. And when that clip went viral, the tone of the entire conversation changed from cautious to openly mocking. Hollywood insiders described this as catastrophic, because once a celebrity becomes the punchline, it is nearly impossible to reassert control over the way the public views them. And the PR experts analyzing Blake's moves kept emphasizing that her silence or legal aggressiveness only fueled the perception of guilt and insecurity rather than strength. Whereas Justin Baldoni had carefully positioned himself as patient, calm, and almost reluctantly dragged into this mess, Blake appeared frantic. And this contrast mattered enormously in an industry where image is everything, and timing can make or break careers. The deeper layer of this drama was the whisper network of Hollywood power. Players who had once backed Blake with open arms. Those producers, executives, and stylists who benefited from her shine were now distancing themselves because association with scandal brings risk, and the whispers said they were looking for the next star to elevate, perhaps even transferring loyalty to Justin, who suddenly looked like the wronged creative visionary battling the system, rather than the manipulative villain he had once been painted as. Every shift in perception like this matters because it affects who gets greenlit for projects, who gets invited to galas, and who receives the protective shield of the industry machinery. And then there was Taylor Swift herself, the ghost at the center of it all, who had not spoken publicly, but whose shadow loomed over every mention of the texts her fans scoured through every tiny clue in her performances and social media posts to determine if she was signaling anything about the case. And the irony was that she did not need to say A word her silence was louder than anything, because everyone knew that if those texts showed she had been dragged or betrayed by Blake, the backlash would be ferocious, and Swifties have proven time and again they can end careers when they perceive betrayal. The industry trembles when that fandom mobilizes. By this point, the court transcripts and leaked notes made it clear the judge was not entertaining Blake legal maneuvering with sympathy. In fact, the bluntness of the rulings shocked some observers, because Hollywood stars are often coddled by legal systems. But here the judge was repeatedly emphasizing fairness, transparency, and relevance over celebrity reputation, and that destroyed the aura of untouchability that Blake had relied upon for so long, because if a judge will not protect the image, then the image must survive on its own in the battlefield of public opinion. And right now it was bleeding. The lawyers on both sides understood this dynamic too. And that is why Baldoni team leaned heavily into language about truth, openness, and accountability, while Blake attorneys attempted to raise alarms about privacy and harassment. Yet that language backfired, because in the public arena, privacy arguments sound weak when weighed against notions of honesty and justice, especially in an era where audiences feel entitled to the behind-the-scenes reality of their stars. And so every filing by Blake seemed to validate the perception she was hiding something, while every filing by Baldoni seemed to reinforce the narrative he was unafraid of the truth. And so by the middle of these proceedings, it was obvious that even if Blake technically won on some legal motions, the larger battle was already lost, because the conversation had moved far beyond the courtroom into a cultural referendum on authenticity and hypocrisy. In celebrity culture, journalists and think pieces wrote about how this case symbolized the collapse of the manufactured Hollywood fairy tale, and how audiences were no longer content with polished narratives. They wanted the messy, complicated truth. And if Blake was the symbol of the old guard trying desperately to preserve an image, then Baldoni, and by extension Swift, represented a new wave of unfiltered storytelling that resonated with a disillusioned public. Every time a new snippet leaked or a journalist tweeted from the courthouse, the frenzy reignited, and talk shows, podcasts, and YouTube commentators devoted entire episodes to analyzing Blake. Behavior, from her body language on court appearances to her silence on social media, and every detail was treated as evidence in the court of public opinion. While Blake defenders tried to paint the coverage as unfair, the reality was that silence and secrecy only deepen intrigue, and the more she tried to restrict narratives, the more uncontrollable they became. It was a paradox that her team could not escape. Hollywood stylists whispered to magazines that clients were refusing to be dressed alongside Blake at upcoming events, fearing the optics of alignment with her brand, and sponsorship consultants leaked that major luxury companies were quietly reviewing contracts with her because no brand wants to be linked to instability and possible betrayal of America's most beloved singer. And these rumors amplified the sense that her empire was crumbling from within, not because of one text or one case, but because she no longer controlled the narrative. The online response was equally brutal, with countless threads breaking down timelines of Blake alleged betrayals, with some even digging into her past interactions and resurfacing old interviews that in hindsight appeared insincere. The internet thrives on retroactive judgment, and once the narrative flips, every past statement becomes a potential piece of incriminating evidence. Fans were connecting dots, real or imagined, and creating a mosaic of suspicion that painted Blake as calculated rather than genuine through it. All the key constant was that Swift name remained untouched. The loyalty to her was unwavering, and that in itself was a warning sign for Blake, because no matter what argument her lawyers crafted, it could never overcome the tidal wave of cultural protection surrounding Swift. If the text painted her as betrayed, then Blake was finished in the eyes of millions. And even if the texts were less dramatic, the very fact that Blake had tried so hard to bury them suggested she had something to hide, and perception in Hollywood often matters more than fact. And as the hearings continued, insiders noted how unshaken Baldoni seemed entering and leaving court, compared to Blake's visibly tense demeanor. Paparazzi shots captured the difference. Perfectly, one figure looked embattled but resolute, while the other looked cornered and hunted. Those images became memes and headlines, and only deepened the impression that the balance of power had shifted irreversibly away from her. The culmination of this phase came when the judge issued yet another ruling against Blake, attempt to seal materials, and the legal reporters outside practically shouted that this was unprecedented in tone. The language of the decision suggested not only rejection, but impatience with her team antics, and that sealed it in public discourse. Once a judge signals annoyance with a celebrity litigant, The press will amplify that tone, and the narrative becomes humiliation. At this stage, the question was no longer whether Blake could win, but whether she could survive, because even if she clawed out a technical legal victory, the reputational damage was so severe that she would need years of deliberate image rehabilitation to recover. And in Hollywood, years of absence is often equivalent to irrelevance. So whispers of producers moving on to other faces became louder with each passing day. As we bring this explosive story to a close, it is clear that what started as whispers of a feud has spiraled into one of the most dramatic public meltdowns Hollywood has witnessed in years. The threads connecting Taylor Swift, Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, Ryan Reynolds, and the media at large reveal not just a clash of personalities, but a much deeper battle over truth, power, and influence in an industry built on perception. We have seen Blake Lively go from a beloved Hollywood figure to someone caught in a storm of leaked texts, subpoenas, public criticism, and a courtroom tug-of-war that seems to grow messier by the day. Each new revelation, whether from a judge striking down her legal arguments or from commentators like Signore tearing into her credibility, has reshaped the way both the public and the industry view her reputation. On the other hand, Taylor Swift's role as both a silent force and a potential witness has added a level of intrigue rarely seen in celebrity disputes. Every headline about her engagement being overshadowed by Blake's humiliation shows how unpredictable this saga has become. The irony is that a case meant to silence critics and protect reputations has instead unleashed a torrent of scrutiny, betrayal, and exposure that no PR spin can control. If anything, this has proven that the court of public opinion is often more powerful than the courtroom itself. Hollywood is watching every move, wondering who will fall next and whether alliances that once seemed unshakable will crumble under the weight of ego and evidence. The story is far from over, but one truth is undeniable. The image of perfection that stars like Blake Lively fought so hard to maintain has shattered, and in its place stands a reminder that in the world of fame, secrets do not stay buried forever.